I'd like you to go ahead and turn your Bibles to Galatians chapter number 2. Galatians chapter 2, we began a series a few weeks ago entitled Free Indeed. The idea behind it is discovering and experiencing what it means to truly be free in Christ. This morning I want to speak on probably one of the greatest things that hinders us. That is this element of hypocrisy. To be quite honest with you, it is very difficult to have to live two lives and keep the stories straight. There are many who attempt to do so. You can be one thing around these individuals, but you have to be something else around these individuals over here. The challenge comes in keeping the stories straight and remembering which group you're a part of. Because you don't want to act the wrong way around these people because they might not think you're quite so cool. You don't want to act this way around the church people because you really don't want them to know that. What a life of bondage. As we will see, it is ultimately a life of the bondage of public approval. What does everybody think about me? If you want to drive yourself crazy, try to govern your life by that rule. What does everybody think? You will get more sense out of knocking your head against a brick wall than you will trying to govern your life that way. Because people themselves typically don't know what they think. One day they might think it's a good idea, the next day they think it's a bad idea. One day you're great, the next day you're a loser. You can't live by what everyone else thinks about you. There has to become in each one of our lives a reality of what God knows to be true about me. And when I come to terms with that, and I come to terms with the realization that I have been put here on this earth for one purpose, and that is to glorify God. By the way, all of the other purposes that people typically throw out are subservient to this one big one. Okay? The reason you and I are here is to bring honor and glory to God. That is achieved through multiple avenues. But the main reason that we're here is to bring honor to Him. I therefore have to govern my life in view of what He knows to be true about me, not what He thinks to be true about me. There's a lot of difference between the two. What God thinks about me is what God knows about me. God knows every single detail of my life. If that comes to you as a challenge, then I would suggest there are probably some details in your life that shouldn't be. If that statement that God knows every detail about your life comes as a great encouragement, then I'd say you're on the right track. But only you know the answer to those questions. In order for us to be free indeed, we have to avoid the snare of hypocrisy. When my practice contradicts my profession. I say this, but I do this. There's a problem with that. Let's begin in Galatians chapter number 2. The Bible says, "But when Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face, because he was to be blamed. For before that certain came from James, he did eat with the Gentiles. But when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them which were of the circumcision. And the other Jews dissembled likewise with him, insomuch that Barnabas also was carried away with their dissimulation. But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, I said unto Peter before them all, If thou being a Jew livest after the manner of Gentiles, and not as do the Jews, why compellest thou the Gentiles to live as do the Jews? We're going to stop the reading there, and we begin by noticing the rebuke of Peter. As we've already noticed, the Judaizers infiltrated the churches within the region of Galatia. They began to draw away some of those who professed to be Christians. And these Judaizers insisted that works have to accompany faith in order for salvation to be genuine. Well, it's easy for us to look at that and say, I can't believe they were so foolish to try to force some sort of a circumcision or something like that. But let me tell you, while we may not do that exact same ritual, oftentimes we have our own ideas of things that we add to salvation. We need to be very clear. Salvation is by grace through faith alone, and that's it. It does, however, result in a transformed life. Life that's not been transformed, James is very clear, says that person's faith is dead. Okay? I mean, there's a balance here, and we've got to recognize this particular balance. What I want you to understand is the essence of salvation is ultimately by grace through faith alone. Part of the way that they successfully infiltrated the churches and led believers away was by discrediting the authority of Paul. If they could succeed at undermining his authority, they could then succeed at undermining his message. By undermining his authority, they could reduce his message really to nothing more than a new philosophy or a teaching that is in contradiction to a long-standing system of tradition that is known as Judaism. That was exactly what they began doing. Knowing the eternal consequences of this false teaching, Paul very systematically developed an argument against false teaching. And all the way back in chapter 1 and verse 10, Paul began establishing his authority and the nature of his message. We've already seen at the end of chapter 1, beginning in verse 10, all the way through the end of the chapter, that he did not get his authority or his message from man. Immediately after he was saved, he went into the uninhabited region of Arabia and then later returned to Damascus. 3 years later, he went to Jerusalem where he stayed with Peter, but that was only for 15 days. Besides James, the brother of the Lord, he didn't see any of the other apostles. Therefore, he could not have received his authority from them. Paul received it from God. Paul's message, we saw last time, was a message that was recognized by the apostles in Jerusalem. This is what he alluded to in chapter 2. Not sure which visit it was. Probably the famine relief visit that's found in Acts chapter number 11, when he met privately with the apostles who were revered as being influential. In a closed-door meeting we read about last time with Peter, James, and John, they didn't contribute to his message. They instead extended the right hand of fellowship to him and recognized God has called Peter to the Jews and Paul to the Gentiles. Paul's authority is further confirmed in this section of Scripture because the message which he and Peter preach is actually the same message. Paul wasn't subservient to Peter. If he had been, he would have never been able to have rebuked him. Paul was instead forced to rebuke Peter because of the inconsistency of his practice with his message. Paul had received his message from the apostles in Jerusalem. He would not have been able to rebuke Peter because Peter would have been superior to him. That wasn't the case. According to verse number 11, the Bible says that this took place when Peter was come to Antioch. We do not actually have an account of this particular visit when Peter came to visit Antioch. Nothing is ever stated in the book of Acts. We can't say with absolute certainty when this took place. It seems to me that probably Paul went to Jerusalem in Acts chapter 11. That was what he described in Galatians 2, 1 through 10, the end of the famine relief visit. The Jerusalem Council meets in Acts 15 and establishes very clearly that salvation is by grace through faith alone. From that point in time, the apostles are unwavering about this. So it would seem as though Peter most likely came to Antioch at some point in time after Paul went to Jerusalem, but before the Jerusalem Council, in between that time frame. But regardless, he gets there, and when he arrives, all of a sudden there's a little bit of a vacillation that's there. And I want you to see, beginning with this, the nature of the gospel. If you were to go back, and I don't have the time to look into it, but in Acts chapter number 11, you find that there was a lot of uncertainty regarding the Gentiles being included in the kingdom of God. It was in the beginning of Acts chapter 11 when the Jews actually kind of rebuked and even questioned Peter for eating with the Gentiles. And Peter went back and he explained the vision that he had had in Acts chapter 10 when he was sent to the home of Cornelius. The Bible says that when they heard these things in Acts chapter 11, they held their peace and glorified God, saying, and this is what I want us to see, then hath God also to the Gentiles granted repentance and life. The Jews thought this message of Christianity was something that was reserved for these people over here. God says, no, it's not. It was instead a message that was to the Jew first, according to Romans 1 and verse 16, and then also to the Greek. Now, this was a fact that was accepted, but the acceptance of these people into churches was a whole other matter. Okay, you can have salvation, but you're not welcome to have salvation here. You worship differently. We can't worship the same way. You're a Jew, we're a Gentile. And all throughout the New Testament letters, we find many passages that are given to instruct both Jews and Gentiles to function in a unified manner as God would have them to function. For example, in Ephesians chapter number 2, the Bible teaches that He is our peace, Jesus Christ, who hath made both Jews and Gentiles one, and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us. There was a division that existed between Jews and Gentiles. That division was done away with in Jesus Christ, having abolished in His flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make in Himself of twain one new man, so making peace. God's capable of taking Jews and Gentiles, two different people, and making one. That's the essence of the gospel, the nature. Ephesians chapter 2, he continues and he says, for through Him we both have access by one Spirit unto the Father. Who's both? Jews and Gentiles. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you come from. You have an opportunity to be saved, and you have an opportunity to be able to approach God. And as Paul begins to approach, or as Paul continues to establish his authority, he is forced to rebuke Peter for his hypocritical practice. Leaders in Jerusalem had added anything to Paul's message. His rebuke to Peter would have been unnecessary. In fact, Paul would have been a hypocritical one if that was the case. But that's not what happened. You see the nature of the gospel, but I want you to also see the inclination towards hypocrisy. It's a glaring problem within the lives of many Christians. And that is the hypocritical tendency to say one thing and do something else. Each of us can sit here piously and think of individuals who are guilty of this kind of hypocrisy. You get that? Some of our spouses next door are really trying to work these kinds of things. I hope you're listening to this. I hope each one of you is, to be quite honest. It's kind of boring preaching. But nonetheless, it's a whole lot more exciting than somebody actually does. We condemn the Pharisees for their attitude towards sinners. Oh, Jesus is sinners. So we condemn the Pharisees for their relationships towards immoral people, those who are rejected by society. But we'll all sit here in our churches and nod in agreement that Christ died for all. Amen, brother. He sure did. Thank God He did. You realize that includes the homosexual? You realize that includes the person who certainly doesn't give any kind of appearance whatsoever of being a Christian? Would it be okay if some person tattooed from head to toe, long hair, walks in the back of this church? It better be. Is it okay if someone of different ethnicity walks into the back of this church? It better be. If it's not, some heads are going to roll and it ain't going to be mine. Okay? And I am dead serious about that. If this church cannot accept sin, you need to leave. Because that's what this ministry is about. Now, there are some rough people out there. What do we have the tendency to do? Man, no. You're nasty. You're annoying. You're repulsive. Jesus said, I came not to call the righteous, sinners. Last night, Jack mentioned the church was to deal with people who are sinners. Whether we be preaching them in the gospel, or whether we be edifying to the truth of the word of God. We must strive to ensure that our practice is in line with our position. We need to ensure that our practice is in line with our proclamation. What we do needs to match what we say. Jesus said in Luke chapter 12 and verse number 1 to his disciples, beware ye of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. You know what the word beware means? Watch out. Avoid this. Suggests that there's a tendency that we all have towards this. This shouldn't characterize you, said Jesus. You need to be aware of it. You need to steer away from this. You need to be redirected away from hypocrisy. Don't allow this to begin to take place. James admonished his readers with a very practical admonition that all of us have when it comes to the Word of God. James chapter 1, but be ye doers of the Word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. I don't care whether or not I have a good message. What I want to know is you go out and you put the truths of the Word of God into practice. The outline's messed up, the outline's messed up. If the PowerPoint messes up, the PowerPoint messes up. But you go and you take the Word of God that is faithfully taught and you live it. That's the greatest compliment that can be there. We nod our head and say, wow, that was a really great message. Then go live like it. I don't care about the compliment. You go be different. For if any be a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like unto a man beholding his natural face in a glass, in a mirror. For he beholdeth himself and goeth his way, and straightway or immediately forgetteth what manner of man he was. This individual takes a look in the mirror and seemingly observes problems. Doesn't do any correction with it. He just simply walks away and immediately forgets what he just saw. Good character. Whoso looketh into the perfect law of liberty and continueth therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his doing. In our Bible Institute, I challenged one of the classes to recall the previous day's sermons, only chapter and book. For a few moments, I saw beads of sweat begin to come on people's foreheads. Yesterday. And all of a sudden, my point is how prone we are to quickly forget things. Messages go in one ear and out the other by the time Sunday dinner starts. It's time to move on with our own lives. That's not what God would have to do. Guard against hypocrisy and strive for consistency. You see the nature of the gospel and the inclination towards hypocrisy. Let's also see the condemnation by Paul. At some point in time, as we've already observed, Peter traveled to Antioch, the location where Paul and Barnabas served, and the location from which ultimately they were sent on their missionary journeys. If you were to picture in your mind, if you have the Mediterranean Sea and you've got Israel as it goes up the coast, and you come around, you wrap around the corner of the Mediterranean Sea. Antioch's located up here. It's a long way away from Jerusalem. That's where Paul and Barnabas were ministering. It's where they were called out to go out on their first missionary journey. They traveled west from that point on. So Peter comes up from Jerusalem and he gets there. And while he was there, the Bible says that Paul withstood him to the face. Words to the face are actually put in front in the Greek. There's the emphasis. You know, Paul rebuked Peter very directly. He didn't go behind his back. He didn't write him a letter. He rebuked him personally. The word withstood is a very powerful word that suggests that Paul placed himself in opposition to Peter. What in the world? Here is two men who are sharing the same faith, but Paul recognized that Peter's actions were wrong. And Paul confronted him and opposed him to his face because the Bible says he was to be blamed, he was to be condemned, he was to be convicted. Peter's actions condemned what he said. They didn't match up. See the rebuke of Peter. We also see the conduct of Peter. What happened? You probably heard this saying, actions speak louder than words. They do. It's a very true statement. Saying something doesn't cost much. I've told my wife or my children, you need to do. Didn't cost me a thing to say that. Okay? But when I do it, well, it's going to cost something. There's going to be a sacrifice if there. Doing, on the other hand, requires a great sacrifice. When our actions, or let's say this way, when our practice contradicts our profession, our profession is invalidated and ignored. What do we mean by this? If you go to work and are consistently the opposite of what you say, then your profession is invalidated in their minds and it is ignored. You're no different than they are. Why would they need to listen to you? See the problem? If you invite them to church, but your mouth is the same as theirs, what's the point? If you're entertained by the same things they're entertained by, then what? Why waste a beautiful Sunday? Oh yeah, we'll go on Easter. Everybody's got to go on Easter. The rest of the days, if that's all your Christianity does, I'm going to the lake on Sunday. At least I can get something beneficial out of it. You see the problem? But on the other hand, when our practice confirms our profession, then both will be validated and noticed. People will take note if you truly live what you say. At that point in time, you will be able to have an effective testimony. Now, people will note your inconsistencies, there's no doubt. But I also want you to understand they'll also note your consistencies. So be not weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap. Paul goes on and he explains, verse number 12, what it was that happened. For before that certain came from James, he did eat with the Gentiles. But when they were come, they withdrew and separated themselves, fearing them which were of the circumcision. James, probably the half-brother of our Lord, the other James seems to have probably been executed by now. James sent some people from Jerusalem to Antioch, where Peter was. It seems as though James stayed behind. We don't know who these people are. Okay? So, here's Peter, who is dining with the Gentiles, having a good time. He's associating with the Gentiles. And all of a sudden, this delegation that James sent up, they arrived. And as soon as they arrived, Peter withdrew and separated himself. The implication is he didn't just do this one time. It was actually repeatedly done in the past. This was not a good thing. He withdrew. It suggests that he drew back or he disappeared. He removed himself. He eliminated contact with them. Oh, at one point in time, he's sitting there eating with them. And then here comes this group from James. Close to it. There. Well, what prompted that kind of a change? I think all of us could say that Peter was very bold in his faith. Do you not agree with that? By the way, we like to say, oh yeah, man, I really identify with Peter in the Word of God. You know what I identify with Peter in the Word of God on? I identify with Peter with sticking my foot in my mouth. But I'll say this, I wish I identified with Peter's case. I can put my foot in my mouth as well, if not better than Peter. But I'm not stepping out of the boat. Okay? No way. I'm not going on and doing many of the things that Peter went on and did. I can't relate well to his faith. Be careful saying, oh yeah, I'm just like Peter. Probably not. I'd love to have a bunch of Peters. Okay? We've got a bunch of people who probably are good at putting their feet in their mouths. Nice, okay? Speaking of foot in the mouth, there you go. All right? Just like that. Happens so quickly. Very good with putting our feet in our mouth, but when it comes to our faith and when it comes with our boldness of sharing that faith, I'd take a church full of them all day long. What a challenge. Paul says Peter withdrew because he was fearing them which were of the circumcision. Here's what I want you to see. The root of hypocrisy, and I almost took these subpoints and made them the main points so we could take and readjust this outline. The root of hypocrisy is public approval. Always. Those who are hypocritical lose sight of the more important reality that God sees and knows all. There is therefore never a thought that you will have, a word that you will speak, or a deed that you will ever accomplish of which God is not already aware. He knows every detail of our lives, including aspects of our lives about which we don't even know. God knows your blood pressure right now. Okay? You don't. God knows your pulse rate right now. You don't. God knows what your brain's doing. For some, that's pretty easy read. Okay? For others, it's a little bit more in-depth. All right? God knows all of these details. Consider this in Psalm 139, what David said. O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Thou knowest my down sitting, mine uprising. You know when I sit down, you know when I get up. Thou understandest my thoughts afar off. You understand my thoughts before they come to me. Man, what a thought. Thou compassest my path and my lying down, and art acquainted with all my ways, for there is not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Shouldn't have said that, should I? Take our eyes off of this reality that God sees and knows everything about us, and we place them upon what man thinks problems are inevitable. When we become more concerned with what man thinks, we will begin to govern our decisions in order to attempt to gain their perceived favor. Peter said, well, I can't eat with these people because I've got to still maintain favor with these from that James sent up from Jerusalem. And when we do so now, we have abandoned the absolute standard of right and wrong in favor of a standard that is constantly shifting. What does man approve? Well, let me say what God approves, first of all. What God said was wrong 2,000 years ago is still wrong today. You know, if God tarries, it will still be wrong in another 2,000 years. It didn't change. But man's ideas of right and wrong are not that way. 50 years ago, man said many things to be wrong that now they declare to be right. 20 years ago, 10 years. We have changed drastically and quickly in our culture. Used to be a time when man said these things were wrong. Now we don't. Man continues this downward spiral of spiritual decline. His sense of right and wrong inevitably is going to decline, and therefore his ability to determine right and wrong will decline. Okay? Make decisions of right and wrong based on what we think and what we feel and what we want. Well, those are some pretty dumb ideas. I never want to get out of bed when my alarm goes off. Okay? Sometimes I don't. Those are problems, okay? But this is the reality of it. We can't make decisions based on that. We cannot shift the absolute standard of right and wrong in favor of a standard that is constantly shifting right and wrong. That's exactly what Peter did. I want you to understand that this root of hypocrisy creates inevitable problems. These problems are quite a bit, to be quite honest with you. We'll see some of these things come about, but you're going to have problems when this is your wrong authority. I want you to also see that it occurs very subtly. This isn't something that just takes place immediately. It's often something that is very gradual. Peter was obviously not settled in his own mind regarding this, or he would have had this problem. He wasn't settled, and therefore when the opportunity came, what do I do now? And that's what Peter did. It occurs very suddenly. You see, the root of hypocrisy is in public approval, but we move on and we see the result of hypocrisy. And that's hindered relationships. Things are not going to be good when we're hypocritical. Notice Peter's actions. Peter says, oh man, I'm not going to associate with people over here. And as soon as that happens, notice verse 13, and the other Jews dissembled likewise with them. So we find the first group that's affected adversely is the other Jews. Hypocrisy is not something that is merely isolated from relationships among other people. We become man-centered. And that's what the hypocrite is. He's man-centered. He's focused more on what man thinks. Our relationships with others are adversely affected. We want to gain a more favorable opinion, so we'll do whatever means is necessary. And our actions inevitably have an effect on them. If our actions are positive, then the effect is positive. If our actions are negative, then by default, the effect on those will also be negative. So Peter withdrew himself, and the other Jews dissembled with him. The word dissembled, it's only found here in the New Testament. You know, this is kind of comical. The rest of the Jews said, hey, we can go ahead and play a part in pretending too. Peter's pretending, yeah, we'll go ahead and pretend too. Just as birds of a feather flock together. Can I say that pretenders often breed pretenders? You find them. Oh yeah, let's just be hypocritical together. Might as well. They'll find themselves in similar groups with individuals who have similar values. We don't want to minimize the hypocritical actions of these Jews, but Peter was responsible for leading them in a hypocritical way. Take a rock and toss it into a lake, it produces ripples. The first rippling effect had the other Jews. Then it goes to Barnabas. Insomuch, or to the extent that Barnabas was also carried away with their dissimulation. He was led away with their dissimulation, with their hypocrisy. You know, godly individuals can be hypocritical. Both Peter and Barnabas, I would say, are very godly individuals. That's the Word of God attests. But they weren't right here. Even Barnabas got caught up with this. What happens is we lose focus of things and we find ourselves placing ourselves subject to man's approval. Hypocrisy doesn't only affect a certain class of Christians. It's not just the Sunday morning only. It's all. And it oftentimes rears its ugly head when we're coming. When we hold someone to a higher standard than we are willing to hold ourselves, we're guilty of hypocrisy. Do you know when we tell everyone else what needs to be done and we remain unwilling to be a part of what needs to be done, we're hypocritical? Hey, preacher, I think you need to do this. Okay, don't do it. No, I don't want to do it. You need to do it. It works like that. The saints are to do the work of the saints. Doesn't mean the pastor's not involved in it, but that's God's plan. Hold someone to a higher standard. Well, you can't act like that. Well, you do. You see? There are problems that are there. The result of hypocrisy has hindered relationships with other Jews, Barnabas, but here's the one that we could put first, but it is certainly the most important. Relationship with God. We are often content to get away with certain things in our own lives as long as individuals don't find out. Man, am I going to be in trouble if mom and dad find out? Every teenager has said that before. Why did you do it? Because I didn't plan on getting caught. Duh. Okay. So the whole purpose of doing this was not to get caught. The plan was to not get caught. That's why I did it. Okay? I was aware of the consequences if I get caught, so I just won't get caught. Therefore, I won't have the consequences. What about when God sees and knows all? I got caught. God sees. God already knows. The letters to the 7 churches of Asia Minor, Jesus stated to the church in Sardis, I know thy works, that thou hast the name that thou livest. You got a reputation, says God, regarding this church. You have a reputation of spiritual vitality. But God knew their spiritual reality. And it wasn't for everyone else. He goes on just a little bit later in that passage and says, I have not found your works perfect. So that leads us then to a correction by Paul. We find a very stern rebuke, verse 14. But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, I said unto Peter before them all, if thou being a Jew livest after the manner of Gentiles, and not as do the Jews, why compellest thou the Gentiles to live as Jews? Hypocritical action needs stern rebuke, and it needs radical transformation. As soon as Paul realized what was going on, he addressed the problem, but very strong contrast. When I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, when they were not straightforward about the truth of the gospel that extended to both Jews and Gentiles, not one that's limited by ethnicity, but one that is available to all. When I saw how they were acting, Paul said, I rebuked Peter to the face before all of them. Well, that wasn't very nice. You know what? Peter needed it. By rebuking the leader, he was rebuking those who followed him. I want you to see that Paul went straight to the source of the problem. The problem was Peter. Peter was rebuked, the Bible says, before them all, literally in the presence of all of them. Well, why didn't Paul do that privately? I mean, that should have been, Peter, step into my office. Matters of private wrongdoing are to be rebuked privately. Matters of public wrongdoing are to be rebuked publicly. Every one of my lovely daughters, and I deeply love you, have heard the words, don't you put me in this spot right now. You want to fight publicly? We'll fight publicly. Every one of my lovely daughters simmered right now. You really want to have this scene right here? I'm fine with it. Let's have it. I don't care. You want to yell? Let's yell. My wife goes, honey, can't you do this? Okay. And I'm thinking, daughter, you better back off. It'd be a public rebuke. Public rebuke in the stores of Walmart, whatever it is. Look, this was a public action, and it needed to be rebuked publicly. We've gotten soft in our day. I'm not saying that you go around and you're harsh and things, but guys, there has to be a definite stand that has taken place. And at times, it is going to be a very definitive definitive stand that everyone is able to see. Don't do this, says Paul to Peter. They did it in front of all of them. And then there's a penetrating question. Peter, if thou, being a Jew, livest after the manner of Gentiles, and not as do the Jews, why compellest thou the Gentiles to live as do the Jews? Peter, why is it that you as a Jew are willing to function as a Gentile as long as the Jews aren't present? Why do you expect the Gentiles to live like the Jews? Notice Peter never gave an answer. There isn't a good answer to give. Why are you inconsistent? Why do you hold these to this standard? You don't hold yourself to that same standard. I want to compare very quickly Jesus and the Pharisees. Jesus dealt with the matter of hypocrisy frequently and very sternly, I might also add. He frequently addressed the religious leaders as hypocrites. I know we think of the Pharisees as, those people. What if we put the Pharisees as those who sit in the church today? I think that's probably more good. Well, the Pharisees said, we are the religious elite. Jesus said, this people draw nigh unto me with their mouth and honor me with their lips. Their hearts far from me. They regarded themselves as the spiritual leaders of the nation. Follow me and look at what I'll be able to do. Jesus said, you are nothing more than blind leaders of the blind. They appeared beautiful on the outside. Jesus said unto them, ye are like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but are within full of dead man's bones and all uncleanness. Even so ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within ye are full of hypocrisy. Jesus knew the true nature of the Pharisees and knowledge today. Are you attempting to live one way before man, knowing that the reality of God is much different? Maybe you've allowed your practice to contradict your perfection. Can I give you one final scripture reference? James chapter 4, verse number 8. Draw nigh to God, and He will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, you sin. Purify your hearts. There ought not be any hypocrisy in any heart. What a shame. Because if we're honest with ourselves, most if not always, not right. Draw nigh to God. What a wonderful promise He will draw nigh to you. Don't run from it. Don't avoid it. Don't continue to mask anything. Take it off. Do what God wants.